I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order at 6 p.m. We don't have a quorum of the assembly, so cancel that. Have any volunteers from the audience? Yeah, right. We can do another appointment. So you can go ahead and resume your socializing. Sorry, I didn't mean to make it all of a sudden so quiet. Right, thank you. So we're going to try this again, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to go ahead and open the meeting at 6:02. This is a joint meeting with the Planning Commission for Tuesday, October 8th, 2024, and it's 6:02. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
I will. I am not expecting Tim Hale. I'm not sure about Stephanie Nowers. I do believe Dee McKee's walking in the building. Maxwell Sumner.
Present.
Here. Thank you. Bill Gamble.
Here.
Dimitri Fonoff.
Here.
Ron Bernier.
Here.
Moving on to the Planning Commission, Doug Glenn.
Here.
Richard Allen.
Here.
CJ Cohn.
Here.
Andrew Shane.
Here.
Lynn McCabe.
Here.
Wilfred Fernandez will not be present. Kurt Skogan.
Here.
Madam Mayor, you have a quorum of both bodies.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any changes to the agenda? Okay, hearing none, then the agenda is approved as presented. If you'll all stand, please. Chairman CJ, would you lead us in the pledge?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Okay, for the record, let the record show that Assemblyperson McKee arrived at, well, I started at 6:02, so she must arrive 6:03. Okay. The next item on our agenda is audience participation. We do not have a sign-up sheet. Okay. All righty.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the Planning Commission, Assembly. Todd Smolden with the Governor's Office and the Mat-Su. I just not going to take a lot of your time, but wanted to say congratulations, I think, Assembly Member Sumner. And also, I just wanted to extend an invitation to you as well as other members of the committee and Assembly always that if you have questions for the Governor's Office, if you have questions about DOT or for DOT, and you're looking for answers, I'm happy to help, so feel free to give me a call. Thanks. Oh, I am also keenly interested in the work that you're doing as a constituent, especially in helping me get from Palmer to Willow by bypassing Wasilla in the afternoon. So thank you for the work you're doing in that area as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Todd. Is there anyone else from the audience that would like to address the joint bodies? Caleb, do we have anybody online? We do not have anybody online. So we'll go ahead and close audience participation. Joint items of business. The first one is Bogard Corridor Access Management Plan updated. And Mr. Brown, do you have a report, or are you just going to let staff? Okay, all righty.
Madam Mayor, members of the Assembly, members of the Planning Commission, Alex Strawn, Planning Director for the Mat-Su Borough. Tonight, I have the privilege of sort of unveiling a new plan that we've been working on with the State of Alaska, Department of Public Works and Planning, and HDR to develop the corridor access management plan for the Beauregard-Selden corridor. This is I think everybody drives it at some point or another. It's an extremely important east-west connection in our transportation network. It's one of our oldest roads. If you look at our oldest maps that we have, this road shows up on there. And I don't think the people who built the road had any idea how much growth would occur on that road over the next, upcoming decades, but certainly a lot of growth has occurred, and there's still potential for a lot of growth to occur because there's a lot of undeveloped land in that area. So there has not been good access management for that corridor up until hopefully now. And the purpose of this plan is to essentially help the flow of traffic, to improve safety, and to decrease the amount of decision points that people have when they're traveling on that road, so they can hopefully travel safer and even potentially at higher speeds. So this will serve as a guiding document for us when we're looking at subdivisions, large subdivisions that want to access onto that corridor, or large developments, be they gravel permits or whatever they may be. This will help us determine what the new access would look like. It also, when we're doing this, we're looking at the public as a whole. We're looking at the traveling public as a whole and trying to move traffic along. There are going to be some people who are not going to be happy with this because their access is going to be affected. So please bear that in mind when you're reviewing this document and when you're considering adopting it. So we have started a webpage. It is bogardseldenaccess.matsugov.us. It's an interactive web map. You can zoom in and out, and you can see what the plan is for any particular area along that corridor. And comment period opens tomorrow, and it closes December 3rd, where we're going to be going through all the processes with the various boards and going to community councils and talking about this. We are having an open house in November, I think that I'm going to pass it along to our Public Works Director, who's been involved along the way as well.
Okay. Alex, do you mind if I see if anybody has questions before you turn it over, or did you want to wait and take questions after Tom's done, or how did we want to work that? Mike?
Let's speak, and then it's the same topic. Yeah.
Okay.
They're not ready to move it.
We're not ready to, okay.
No,
All right, thank you.
Yeah, good clarification. And
Happy birthday.
Yep, thank you,
Did you
Mayor.
bring us some cake?
No better way to spend it than right up here in front of all of you, so I appreciate all that. Anyways, yeah, thank you, Mayor, Member Assembly, Commissioners, Andrew Brown, Tom Adams, Public Works Director. So just a couple things to recognize. You're going to see the theme tonight, obviously, is planning, right? That's why we chose this meeting to do so. But, this corridor access management plan is that theme. I want to jump right to the fact, we've done this presentation several times now, and everybody wants to know, when is this going to be done? I need to encourage you to look at this as just that. This is just a plan. This is not a project. This is really just a mechanism for us to identify, assess, evaluate, conceptualize potential ways for us to manage access to a pretty significant travel corridor in the Mat-Su Valley. So, when we get to that point of talking about the actual plan, you'll see some of those ideas identified. But just, keep in mind that, some of these things that are being thought about now may take a couple decades to come to fruition. So don't get too excited, but it is an exciting topic, that the fact that we're actually reviewing this, but it's not like we're going to start building necessarily any particular project in the next 6, 8, 12 months. So with that being said, I get the privilege of introducing Lori Cummings. Lori's project manager with HDR, our consultant that's been selected for the corridor access management plan, and she's going to go through the presentation.
Thanks, Tom. As you mentioned, my name is Lori Cummings, and I'm with HDR, the consultant hired by the Mat-Su Borough to work with them and the DOT on the Bogard-Selden Corridor Access Management Plan. So historically, the Bogard-Selden Corridor was a local road. It provides direct access to property. We've all seen that there's a lot of driveways and side streets along this corridor, providing people that direct connection from the road to the various land uses. Local roads are typically meant for lower traffic volumes, lower speeds, mainly used by people who are in the area. They live there, they work there, visiting there. It's really meant for that local traffic. Now, Bogard-Selden is really being used as an arterial road. So it's not just for those local users anymore. It's for people that are trying to get from one part of town to another. They typically want to go faster. They're trying to go further. They don't want to have those interruptions of those side streets and those driveways. So now we're starting to get a lot of conflicts because we have two different user groups trying to use the same road. And this is creating problems. You know, we have some sections of the road that have been developed as an arterial, but a lot of it still functions as a collector, where people are expected to go slow. We all know drivers don't necessarily follow the speed limits. You know, so having that function as an arterial is important to make sure everybody's able to use this corridor safely. We have a lot of high congestion and safety concerns on this corridor because it now has the higher traffic volumes. We have a lot of turning traffic as people are trying to go from the road into these local businesses to visit their friends and relatives located on the corridor or on the side streets. And that's creating problems because you have this higher traffic, people trying to make a turn, they get frustrated, tired of waiting, so they make a turn with a gap that may or may not be big enough for them, and that causes drivers to either, potentially have a safety concern, a crash, people slam on their brakes because all of a sudden a car is in front of them. They're just taking more risks trying to make those turns. Cars are traveling at different speeds. We all slow down when we're making a turn, or if we've just turned and we have to accelerate onto the road. So we're going a little slower than those drivers that are just trying to get through the corridor. And because we have a lot of inconsistent spacing, we have driveway here, here, not here, we have another side street over here. People aren't necessarily anticipating where people are turning and where people are accessing the corridor like they do on other routes. And because there's that inconsistency, people aren't necessarily prepared for a car to appear in front of them. And then another complicating fact on this corridor is we have multiple schools. I believe somebody from the borough told me there are 14 schools along this corridor. So you have the combination of school bus traffic, parents dropping their kids off, before school, picking them after school. You have a lot of newer drivers, those 16, 17, 18-year-olds who just got their license, maybe not as experienced, trying to get to those schools. And then we have winter. It's just harder to see people in the winter, harder to slow down. It just complicates traffic along this corridor. So why are we developing a corridor access management plan? We are looking to establish access control along this corridor with a goal of reducing crashes and improving traffic flow to make it safer and easier for everybody to use this corridor. People who are using it as a local road, people who are using it as an arterial, they're trying to make it safer for everyone. So partly why we're looking at these issues now is because there are several upcoming projects on this corridor. And I apologize, I was just informed today that some of these projects have changed names. So what you see on the screen may not be the name that you know them now as in the SIP. But DOT and the borough are working together to make improvements along this corridor. So they're able to take these recommendations developed in the camp and include those recommendations in these projects. So not only is the project going to be able to start sooner, get those recommendations in there, we're saving time and money because we can incorporate it into the existing project. We don't have to come back with a second project. We don't have to disrupt the corridor for a second time to come back and bring in these corridors. Everybody gets frustrated when, DOT or an agency, improves a road. A year or two later, they have to come back, tear it up and do something else. So by able to address all of these projects together, it improves the corridor and just makes it easier for everyone. But like Tom mentioned, that's not to say that all of these recommendations will be implemented in the short term. There are some projects that will have to be, some recommendations that will have to be included in future projects, as the road is reconstructed and improved in the future, because it makes sense to deal with them as a collective, as opposed to individual, spot improvements along the corridor. So, and it's also important to know that even though we're developing an access management strategy, we can't eliminate all access along the corridor. As much as some people would love, just make it all access controlled. They can go down the entire corridor at 55 miles an hour. We can't do that. There's still property and businesses along this corridor that people have to access, and we have to give them that access that they need. So the project team, looked at a variety of ways to kind of balance those needs for people to be able to travel through the corridor and still being able to access the property located along it. So we looked at a variety of different strategies to do that. We looked at potentially closing some existing roads with a cul-de-sac and providing those property owners and business users with another way out to the Bogard-Selden corridor. We looked at opportunities to potentially realign an intersection. We all know there are locations where the streets on the sides don't quite line up. And it's hard to get across because you're never quite sure. So opportunities to bring those to be proper four-way intersections. We also looked at things like non-transversable medians, so that, restricting left turns, making it so that people control where they're going. Potentially frontage roads. So rather than providing them direct access off Bogard-Selden, we have a road parallel to that, where people are able to provide access to that property. And we looked at a variety of other issues as well, such as, intersection and driveway spacing, driveway management, such as limiting the number of new driveways, potentially consolidating existing driveways. Some property, they may have 2 or 3 driveways right now. It may make more sense to consolidate that into one access point in the future. We also looked at, right-of-way acquisition opportunities, as well as future intersection control. What should these intersections be like over the next 10, 20, 30 years? Should it be a 4-way light? Should it be a traffic signal? Should it be a roundabout? So we looked at a variety of different strategies in making our recommendations. So we divided the Bogard-Selden corridor into 6 different segments based on kind of land use and ownership. So the bulk of the plan looks at each segment in detail, and we looked at every driveway and intersection to kind of come up with a recommendation. So it shows what we recommend at each different access point. So I'm not going to bore you by going through every single one of them, although I do encourage you to look at the plan and see what we propose. But these are designed to help people make decisions about what the future, land use and transportation should be on this corridor. So, we have segment A, which is Bogard from the Glen Highway to Palmer Moose Drive. So, and on this section, we really didn't feel any new access points were needed. So in section B, from Palmer Moose Drive, I don't know why that's hard to pronounce, to Trunk Road, we're really trying to minimize new direct access points because there already is a fair amount of access in this corridor already. But in addition, we realized there is some needed, so we're going to develop propose a frontage road between Manna Drive and Eminent Domain Drive, and construct driveway management, such as potentially relocating the Central Gravel Project's driveway and potential cul-de-sacing of Colony Way. So in section C, from Trunk Road to Bogard-Selden, this is where we actually had a lot of different recommendations on how we can improve access control along this corridor. In general, we don't have any new connections except for what is recommended in the borough's OS H&P plan. So we do have some minor realignments of intersections. We propose the closure of multiple driveways, potentially changing the driveways in other locations, constructing a median to provide better use of roundabouts, and constructing new backage roads, constructing cul-de-sacs. So you can see here we've got everywhere you see an X or a symbol, it's basically where we're proposing some type of recommendation. So you'll have better luck if you go to our website and look at the interactive map because now that I see, it's kind of small. Screen's supposed to be blank?
See a blank there.
Okay, then,
Sorry.
Green here is blank.
Screens are
going in and
out up to.
Screens went blank.
Apparently the ones on the dais are going in and out too.
okay, well, that's C2, so we have segment D. We're largely maintaining the existing access with a few modifications, proposing adding some turn lanes, converting a few roads to cul-de-sacs, changing one location to a right-in, right-out intersection, and a few driveway closures. Segment E, from Schrock to Lucille. Again, we don't have too many recommendations in this corridor, mostly driveway closures and cul-de-sacs. And then segment F, from Lucille to Church. We have similar recommendations. We have several cul-de-sacs proposed, closing several driveways, realigning Eureka Circle, and updating the Selden Road, Church Road intersection.
You say that so easily, but I know every chair in this building will be filled at some time, but I know it sort of just rolls off like, okay, we're going to close a few driveways and have a few roundabouts. So anyway, go ahead.
Exactly, and that's why, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of these recommendations will be implemented as part of larger projects when these sections get improved. Because doing them in isolation, may not have the desired end result, but when we can do a whole segment together, that's when we'll really see the benefits of a lot of these recommendations. So the project team has been very busy over the last few weeks, talking to various community councils and other groups. They have gone to the North Lakes Community Council, the Gateway Community Council. Just today, they were at the Mat-Su Valley Planning Technical Committee, and today we're here at the Planning Commission and the Assembly. We're having a public open house on November the 6th at the Mat-Su Career and Technical High School, so I encourage everybody to attend if you can. And we also have a project website, bogardseldenaccess.matsugov.us, and it will be going live tomorrow. So I encourage everyone to check it out. And now we'll happily answer any questions you have today. And if you have any questions in the future, Julie Spackman with the Planning Department is the point of contact for the project.
Questions?
Thanks, everyone.
Questions, comments? Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, Commissioner Sane, I was just curious. I was looking at segment C1 as well as some of these other ones throughout, and I know that, Bogart Selden has been just, it's been a nightmare for traffic.
Right.
I was just curious. I didn't hear anything about potential, maybe like free lane, like a turning lane or something. Is that something that's been considered? It just seems like.
For Bogard Selden?
Yeah, did I miss you talking about it? I was just curious, is that something considered for like that center turning lane?
I think that's more of a question for DOT, but my answer would be, we were looking at access control along this corridor, not improvements to the roadway itself.
Okay.
So it doesn't necessarily preclude there being a center turn lane on it. It's just, we were looking at access control along this corridor, and decisions like that would be made at the actual project stage. So, anything you'd like to add? Okay.
Thanks.
So Assemblyperson McKee, go ahead.
Yeah, when you're talking about crashes on that road, and I've driven that road for 31 years, how does that rate? Is that like one of the most dangerous highways in Alaska, or like some of them are? How does that feel? Because I don't see a lot of wrecks there.
Right. I actually haven't looked at the statistics too much. I believe it is one of the fairly higher. You'll actually be very interested in the presentation that's coming a little later tonight on the Safe Streets for All safety plan.
Thank you kindly.
So I'm sure they will be able to answer your specific question.
And then when you were talking about closing driveways, and of course the mayor jumped on that one,
Right.
me too. What are they gonna do? How do you close a driveway? You put out all these permits that we've got out all over the place, which we've not enforced all of those driveway permits, but people are coming and going. What are you gonna do?
Well, in a lot of cases, it's right now those driveways are providing direct access onto the Bogart-Selden corridor.
Yeah.
Which is where we're having the conflicts with the through traffic and people trying to make the turns.
Yeah.
So in a lot of cases, the driveway would be relocated onto a frontage road, a backage road, a different type of facility so that people will still have access to all of their property and businesses along this corridor. Their access would just be slightly different.
Okay, and
So-
then one final question. I've always wondered, I hate roundabouts. I first encountered them in Asia and everybody's like, looks like, it's craziness. So what is more efficient for traffic flow? I'm assuming that roundabouts are safer because people got to slow down.
Right.
But how about traffic flow?
Right? Roundabouts are typically pretty good for traffic flow because people don't have to stop unless there's traffic already in the roundabout.
Yeah.
Whereas with a traffic light, typically you have to stop. And quite often they're programmed where you're stopping even if there's no cross traffic. Roundabouts, you can just keep going. So usually they're fairly efficient.
Yeah, I'd be
But-
curious to see what that would actually be. I mean, is there a number that says it's 4 times faster or whatever? Just look for that sometime, and I just because I've been curious forever.
That's a good question. I'm afraid I don't have the answer to that one.
Well-
But I do know that as these individual projects advance, they will probably look at those different types of intersection controls and confirm, yes, a roundabout's the appropriate one, or, should conditions change and maybe a traffic signal would be more appropriate.
Okay.
So it's just based on the information we know now, we think roundabouts are the appropriate type of access control in these locations.
Further questions or comments? Okay, let the record show that Assemblyperson Nowers have joined us on the phone at 6:03 and Assemblyperson Hale at 6:22.
Thanks, everyone.
Any further? Okay. All righty, gentlemen. And
Guess now it's time for the next item, Mayor.
go ahead, sir.
Sure. So
Anytime
just
you're
for
ready,
the
I
record,
think.
again, my name's Tom Adams, Public Works Director, and just so everybody follows along, we're moving on
In
to
case you didn't know,
item
you had
B.
a birthday today.
I'm sorry?
I said, in case you didn't get the message earlier, you have a birthday today.
Oh, yeah, I do. I've had 56 before this one, so. Anyhow, we're moving on to item B, so everybody can follow on the agenda. So we're moving to the transportation. But I want to kind of cap off what we were talking before and to recognize some of the comments that are made that, there will be difficult decisions going forward to address the Bogart corridor because effectively it was a travel corridor that is serving a purpose that was never intended to do, and it's had development over time that wasn't anticipated appropriately. So you're right, we'll have difficult conversations, but if we don't start thinking about them and having those, we'll never solve the problem. So I'll just let that marinate for you because I know on our team, we know that we're going to have those difficult conversations at our open houses when they start to show up. So.
Why are you laughing? You probably won't be here. That's why you're laughing.
I am moving on to the Transportation Infrastructure Program. So I guess, just for the record, Assembly members, I absolutely believe that you all understand what our TIP program is since you recently passed an ordinance that allowed the next package to go to the voters here in November. But I'm just curious from the Planning Commission perspective that everybody's at least familiar with our TIP program and why we have it. And the differentiation between road projects, our road improvement projects and our maintenance that can be done on a non-area wide basis versus a TIP program, which is actually done on an area wide basis. So I think it's important to recognize as we talk about this, why we have two separate programs. So I guess I'll get a nod of the heads, maybe some eyes that aren't quite convincing me that you understand. I'll just spend a couple seconds to recognize that what we're going to talk about tonight is our TIP program, and that is on an area-wide basis. And for those that are familiar, we're a second-class borough. We don't have road powers, so any use of area-wide funds for road improvements must be approved by the Assembly and then also ultimately approved by the voters. So that's where we're at, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Wise man earlier today told me a brief presentation is the most appreciated presentation, so I'm going to try to also do that. So I don't have a polished presentation. You have a few handouts up here, and if I get the sheep sook here in 30 minutes, then I didn't meet my boss's expectations. So I want to point out, you do have three handouts that I did provide earlier today that might help you follow through. This is the one I'm going to refer to the most. It's the one that's up on the screen right now. It's going to give you a high-level sense of where we're at with our TIP 21 projects. We also have a package of projects that we have been providing since the TIP 21. Some of you might have been around for a while, recognize, we used to call these road bonds. They've been around since about 2008, 2009. The borough's been doing these, but we rebranded them in 21. We call them TIP 21 now. But it has all the detail of the projects that, well, I shouldn't say all the detail. There's a lot of detail that's in this packet that will give you an explanation of each individual project, some of the funding, and, the basic scope of the project. And then you'll also have a map in there, pretty handy map, I believe. We had our GIS team combine our TIP 21, our TIP 23, and TIP 24 projects, and I'll speak to that a little bit momentarily. But let me get back to TIP 21. So in November 21, recognize I took this job in June of 22, so I get to claim innocence for all of it. But in November of 21, the borough voters did approve a package of projects, 20 projects, altogether roughly $61 million worth at the time to move forward with. And so that's what we've done we're currently working forward on our TIP 21 projects. We quickly recognized, though, that a few months into working our TIP 21, that $60-some million wasn't enough. And I'll just let you know, I'll be honest with you, we're roughly right around $130 million mark right now, estimated to complete the projects as originally anticipated when they were approved by the voters. So what does that mean for us? Well, for us, that means we had to work diligently to rescope projects. We had to refine their limits of work. We had to change what is actually being accomplished. But for the most part, we've done a very good job in acknowledging the voters' intent for each one of these projects. And I'll get into some of the projects we aren't quite successful in, either in, right now, they're projects that might need additional funding, construction funding, or maybe even additional funding to move design further along than we had anticipated. And some projects we might just not be able to accomplish because they've been reprioritized and don't necessarily, we've have other projects where the funding is better served than to get through these. So that being said, overall, we had 2 projects out of the 20 that were effectively just transfers of money. We gave the city of Wasilla $1.5 million so they could do work on their multimodal depot. And then we also provided $1.5 million in monies to DOT as part of the Seward Meridian Parkway Extension Project to install a traffic signal at Tambert. And for those not familiar, Tambert is actually one of the intersections that comes in off of the, the east side of Seward Meridian through some subdivisions between Tate and Seward Meridian, and provides access to what will become a combined access for Career Tech and for Teeland Middle School. So that would be a signalized intersection. So right off the bat, we were able to accomplish 2 projects by just getting rid of the money. In 2023, we started the projects to complete some Mat-Su Borough School District pedestrian projects. That was a collection of probably somewhere around 6 or 8 different projects scattered around the valley to recognize safe routes to school projects to improve access for pedestrian access for students to get to schools. We finished that project earlier this year. 2024, this was a pretty active year for completion of projects. Overall, we moved 5 projects forward. I said 5, but now I'm seeing 4. But anyhow, that's 5. And so for, driving around the valley, you probably saw some activity just about everywhere. On our Trunk Road connector, it's the road in between Old Trunk, Stringfield, and New Trunk right there in the area of Pioneer Peak Elementary and where our new Mat-Su Central School is being constructed. It was a connector road in between. Looking forward to that to serve a lot of purpose and relieving traffic off of the Old Trunk as not only for the new school, but also for Pioneer Peak. Smith Road, we took an extension of an upgrade to the road over here across the river. We also added a pathway. It's a fantastic looking road now and providing a lot of benefit to the community to get pedestrians off of otherwise very busy road. Lakes Boulevard out in the Big Lake area, we took, this is one of those projects that was anticipated to take from its length, basically at at its beginning all the way to the end. We had to really reduce the length of work that could be accomplished here. But we reviewed the alignment, we looked where the paving was the worst and where we could get our best bang, and effectively it was from the beginning of the project at its very east end, and did roughly about 3 miles of paved roadway. And that road was just recently completed. I think even the striping was recently completed. And then out in the Houston area, the Cherry Lake Drive upgrade, for those of you that are familiar with that area. Looking forward a little bit, this is where we start getting into a little bit of splitting projects up in order to maximize the ability to move them forward while either additional funding comes forward or while parts of design still need to be developed. And then on this roadmap, you can see in 2025, we have Hidden Hills and Caswell. They're both out in that Caswell area. Hidden Hills is a pretty important roadway. It's one of the larger subdivisions in the Mat-Su Valley. So it's a pretty big population. And it's a primary and singular access to the Parks Highway for all those developed lots back there. So we'll start phase one. We'll only get a portion of it in from the Parks Highway into Caswell Lakes Road, and we'll still be looking for some additional funding to advance the second phase of that project at some point in the future to take it all the way back into the subdivisions. Caswell Lake was originally anticipated to include several other roads to be paved. We've had to remove those other roads until additional funding's been appropriated, but we're looking to at least pave Caswell Lakes next season. Point McKenzie, obviously everybody's familiar with that road and its condition from its beginning at KGB all the way back back to the port, quite frankly. This project had originally anticipated doing roughly 7 miles of paved roadway. Again, because of cost, we're able to accomplish 3 miles. That project will be out for construction this next year. Edgerton Parks Road, this one, this is a pretty cool project, and once it kind of marries up with one of our other projects, the Palmer Fishhook Pathway. We did some improvements this past year a couple years ago for Mountain Shoals Drive. Now we're looking to improve Edgerton Parks, but we're also going to put in a pedestrian facility from Palmer Fishhook all the way up to Government Peak Recreation Area. So again, another component to get folks off the roadway and give them a safe place, safe refuge to walk. And then Fern Street's another important corridor between KGB and Fairview Loop that we're going to have to phase. We'll start with a northern phase that'll start at KGB and effectively improve that portion of roadway within the Wasilla city limits and get across the fish passage culvert there at Cottonwood Creek. And then we'll look to do some supplemental funding in order to do the rest of the project. And then as I kind of, instead of going through each and every one of these, because that's where the sheep soak comes in, 2026 and beyond, there's a lot of planning that still needs to take place. We got a few projects that will require additional funding. Old Glen Pathway, 49th State Street. Those are specific projects that, for instance, Old Glen's been in the works for a while, but we need more money to be able to actually accomplish the project as envisioned previously. 49th State Street has kind of been deprioritized with respect to a pathway component for pedestrians to the Colony schools. Engstrom Road, some of you are familiar with the fact that we're in the midst of, the project as envisioned in the bond package was revisited, and we got a more useful corridor, I would suggest to you, but it also means that usefulness comes at a price tag that is quite significant. So we're continuing to pick that project apart. It will require some significant funding in the future, which is not currently planned. And then I just want to point out kind of a segue into what I heard earlier for the Bogard Camp. There are other funding mechanisms that are being used. We're not doing just our TIP program. We have our community transportation program that's a federally funded project. It's competed on a statewide basis. The borough was successful this past year in being awarded 2 projects, somewhere in the order of $28 million of federal monies that the borough will have to come up with $3 million, but it's intending to improve a portion of Selden Road between Wasilla, Fishhook, and Lucille. So those that are familiar there, very narrow roadway. It'll become a project at some point in the near future as we exercise the memorandum of agreement with the state of Alaska. And then that the Palmer Fishhook job that you'll see here on this TIP package actually is going to probably, well, not just probably, there was a Transportation Alternatives Program, another federally funded program that we had to compete on a statewide basis, and were awarded monies that will help get that project done, as well as the inner outer Springer pathway. So I want to point that out because I think it's pretty important to recognize that we're going to get somewhere on the order of $31 million worth of federal dollars just in those two programs, with only a match of about $6 million. So that's pretty important that we leverage local dollars and then achieve federal dollars to go along and push those programs through. And then I'd be taking the opportunity that's the TIP 21 projects. We have successfully, out of the $68 million that was pushed to funding for these 20 projects, we have to date spent about $15 million. We've encumbered, so we haven't written a check to a vendor or anybody, but it's set aside to be spent, another 20, with about $33 million that is allocated to complete those projects to the best way we can, recognizing that we're not likely to be able to complete all those projects as originally anticipated. And I just point out, this program, like I said, when we come on board, and when I came on board 2022, 21 was already approved, but we were quickly working on TIP 23. Kudos to the Assembly. We did push forward a TIP 23 package of projects, 17 projects on the order of $76 million altogether. The exception is that proposition was approved by the voters with a requirement to obtain 50% non-local match. That non-local match did not come through. So that set of projects is sitting dormant. So while it has voter approval, we need to get non-local match in order to move any of those particular projects forward. Recognizing that we need to keep pushing forward in infrastructure improvements, our Assembly took up the badge and had administration move forward and prepare a TIP 24 package. So that's what I referred to earlier. November 5th, we have a proposition that's going forward that includes 10 projects, $36 million, no match component required. It includes 36 projects, a combination of new projects brought forward from the TIP 23 package that we thought were important enough that they needed to find a way to be funded, not at 50%, but now at 100%. And then we also have some of these TIP 21 projects that are underfunded that the Assembly won't be on the ballot because they had previous voter approval, but the Assembly is given the authority to pursue bond authority for roughly $18.5 million there. So November 5th elections, get out and vote. Be happy to take any questions. I know that was a lot. I don't see anybody pulling me on my collar, so.
Yeah, I didn't see the attorney jump up out of his chair or anything.
I should say, the collaboration between just interdepartment, between planning, public works, community development, law. I mean, we scrutinize some of these projects we push forward. So it's a team effort, truly is a team effort when we pull these together.
Questions? Yes, Assemblyperson Fauna, go ahead.
Tommy, briefly touched on the 50% match that was we put with hopes to get from the state. You said other, but it was kind of directed towards the state, if I remember correctly, to hopefully get the project. Maybe you or Mr. Brown would know, historically, has the state did anything like this, or it was just like a wish for us? Does it would continue putting that as a priority, and has there other boroughs got anything awarded and similar when they're trying to push a project and they're asking state for help, or that's just so that we kind of have a direction for future if that's something we should pursue and try to get?
So through the mayor to Assemblymember Fonoff. So yes, it has been done before where a bond package was pushed forward and approved by through the Assembly to the voters that required a match component. Over my years, some of you may be aware, I spent 30 years as a consultant pursuing this work from the Mat-Su Borough. But I was aware of the fact that there were times when, that match was 100%, that match was 50%, sometimes it was 25%, but there's varying levels of match that were pushed forward. And many of those times that match showed up. A few of those times it didn't. I can tell you from my experience, when the match didn't show up, the projects didn't happen. So I'm not a big advocate when we actually push propositions together that require, that lean on somebody else in order for you to be able to move your own program forward. But, that's not my call to make. But in this case, it doesn't have to be a state match. I mean, a lot of folks think that's where we lean, but it just has to be a non-local match. So there are other grant opportunities that certainly could be pursued. And if successfully obtained, we could move forward, a package of projects, a single project. The Palmer Fishhook Pathway was a TIP 21 project that we're using the TAP dollars, the Transportation Alternatives Program, through the federal funding as to move that project forward, and you're using the authorization given to us through TIP 21 as our match. So we're marrying those two portions of funding up in order to move a TIP 21 project. So if we had some other funding source come forward, whether it be the state or otherwise, it just has to be non-local.
Quick follow-up.
Yeah, is organization like Matsu Health, is that considered local, or that's not local considered? Do you know?
I'm going to answer, my answer, I'm going to say that would be a non-local match. It's not part of the area-wide funds that I would assume is intended to be the local component.
Okay. And is there, I know one of the things in some of the strategic planning type of meeting, we've asked and we wanted to focus on pursuing grants aggressively, being we have a lot of growth and potential growth. Is there on the road side, is there actively pursued? And I know there is, but how active is that and success rate? And is there, like we were doing now with Port, we're aggressively pursuing, would there be a tool that would be helpful, or someone who's already worked for a borough who has experience in that? That's one of the ideas that we had, but it kind of, we haven't talked too much about it, but I'm saying if on the federal or on a state or whatever it is to pursue and try to score some of these additional funding, I believe that would be a huge help to the borough with how conservatively we're spending our money. So would you be able to give your input on that, please?
Sure, through the mayor, Member Fonoff. So I could tell you in this past year, there's been a lot of conversation and kind of a little bit of change in how we're moving forward and pursuing grant funding. So I know our group, Public Works, spent a lot of effort putting together applications for the CTP and TAP, and, ultimately we're successful in that. I think that's part of what you're getting at, but you're absolutely correct. There are other opportunities out there, especially with BIL and all that good stuff right there. That there are grant opportunities that are probably, we're not spending as much time as we could to pursue. But the same token, you got to balance, what are we doing with the folks that we have and the work that we have, and move forward at the same time trying to pursue funding so that we can continue to complete the projects that we want to complete. So, there is a balance there, but there is a conversation, for instance, this past few months, we've been sending administrative staff to the grant workshops so that we're not relying on just one entity within the borough to identify and to pursue those opportunities. We're kind of diversifying who's trying to find them, vet them, and then, bring them to the right person's attention so that we can pursue them.
Well, my only ask is that we don't ignore any potential opportunity that is there, and just because we historically didn't get, or this is small chance of getting it, I think it's always worth asking, because if you don't knock on a door, it's unlikely that somebody's going to open. So I hope we take advantage of that, because even if that person who wrote the grants for a whole year and they only got $1 million worth of it, that was money towards that employment was well spent, because we 10x or whatever return what we got in return. So I'm hoping that we don't miss any opportunities, because we are growing, and I think we should work hard in that direction.
I'm sorry, yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, through the mayor, I just wanted to remind the assembly that we have restructured based on the strategic planning where we talked about increasing our grants coordinating capacity. So we have created a second grants coordinated position, and I think we just hired the person last week They'll probably start within the next month. So that'll double our capacity for grants coordinating, which is one of the limiting factors because you have to jump through all the hoops of these federal grants. So just to remind the Assembly, that was an action staff took as a product of the Assembly saying, go and create more capacity. And that was where we did some restructuring in-house. We didn't create a new FTE to do that. We just did some rearranging of tasks and offloaded some responsibilities, some of that due to the business license. We eliminated that need and then made some other changes internally to try to create that capacity because it was an Assembly priority. So we are focused on that, and we have applied for many grants that we have not been successful in being awarded. But I think, like Tom said, that CTP TAP award, like just to put it in context, it was a statewide competition, but like in the top 5 projects statewide for roads, which is CTP, the borough, because there were 2 projects from DOT, that Bogard-Selden corridor were the top 4 of 5 projects statewide. That's huge. So we crushed it, and there's some elements of the state that don't love that because others did not score nearly as high because we put focused effort on it. Well, that's 30, 40, well, actually it would be about double that if you count DOT's award. It's $60+ million of federal dollars that we're going to leverage either state or local funds, just a small portion of that in the big scheme of things. So we've been targeting, because we want to be successful, it's much easier to compete on a statewide basis than it is to compete on a nationwide basis. And so we're doing that, and we're creating some more capacity in-house so that we can continue to keep pace with what those opportunities are.
Thank you for that a bit.
And just one last thought, for those not familiar, the borough was declared an urbanized area last year. And so since then, we've become deemed a metropolitan planning organization, and now we have our Mat-Su for Valley Planning. So that's another element that will start to grab some legs here in the next couple of years for funding that will, be designated for programs and projects in our urbanized areas. So, there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve on the borough side, I believe, not just because we have to understand how to be an MPO, but also how best to invest our own borough dollars that supplements, the federal in the urbanized area, but also recognizes we still have areas of the borough outside the urbanized area that needs attention and infrastructure improvement. So,
Further
Madam Mayor?
question? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to, say kudos to the work that the borough manager and staff has done with the funding. I just know a little bit of the intelligent work that went into securing that $31 million. And so I think that was pretty amazing when you look around the state and you think about all the competition. So I really do want to say that real kudos for doing that. I think it's just pretty clear that our needs overwhelm our funding out here. I mean, there's just all sorts of road needs we have, and none of them are cheap. And so I guess what I was wondering about if, as we're trying to solve these problems that we have with all the growth out here, like along Bogard, are there things that that Tom or other folks in the room think we should be doing to make sure we're not creating more of the problems as we're solving the ones we have? Are there things at the planning commission level, assembly level, or otherwise, like I think about Bogard, are we doing anything in the meantime to keep more bad intersections from popping up, or other thoughts? Are there things that we could be doing or should be maybe thinking about and discussing to avoid creating new problems because we got enough on our plate?
So through the mayor, Assembly Member Nauer, so I don't know that I have a great answer for that, but I can share that, I've lived in this valley for more than 40 years, right? The problems that we had 40 years are exacerbated today when you add on nearly 100,000 people to the valley's population. You could have turned a blind eye to some of the things 40 years ago and get away with it. We have. It's changing. It's changing now because our population and our land use, our development will not allow us to continue to ignore some of the problems that have caused the problems that we have today. So we can get on a little bit of a soapbox here. I don't think that's the intent tonight, but I think there's a lot of decision makers up here at the dais. There's a lot of planning commissioners that participate in, hearing the problems that we have, trying to troubleshoot them and find better ways forward. And I know from the borough standpoint, I feel really good in the collaboration that's going on between not only in the borough between departments, but even with our conversations with our DOT partners, a couple of here tonight. There's a lot of conversation on, we recognize our problems. We're not going to solve them all at once. But I go back to what I said earlier tonight, unless you start talking about them, you can't identify them, and you definitely won't solve them without discussion.
Follow up, Assemblyperson Nowers?
No, thank you. I appreciate that. If there's ideas that we could be discussing, some are a little harder to implement than others. As the mayor mentioned, it's easier to put it down on paper than do it in practice. But if there's things to be thinking about, I just think about that Bogard corridor and trying to implement that plan. Are we going to have 6 more intersections in the meantime along there, or other subdivisions popping up where all of a sudden we're pushing traffic onto a busy corridor and creating dangerous intersections? So I appreciate the answer. Appreciate the presentation and all the work that's going on to try to keep up with our growth. Thank you.
Borough Manager? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
so through the mayor to Ms. Nowers, I would very quickly say, I think you have 3 examples on the agenda tonight. Number 1, corridor access management plan for Bogart. Staff are bringing that forward for decision makers to evaluate. Number 2, Tom just talked about tip 21, tip 23, tip 24. Like the last tip package, if you will, they didn't call it tip back then, was back in 2018? So we are trying to find a rhythm to recurring packages that are affordable and find a rhythm for that. We have not done that as a borough. So that's a big thrust of what you're seeing happening right now. And that's why there have been 3 ballot propositions out there over the past few years. And then lastly, and I don't want to steal Joni's thunder here in a minute, but this comprehensive safety action plan is also taking a look at how do we develop our own. I would kind of liken it a little bit, and I'm stretching it a little bit, but the state has the HSIP. They have a safety improvement program. The borough doesn't have that. So what Tom and his staff and planning and their staff are doing is looking at how do we create some programs around these things where we can do better in terms of how we prepare projects, do project development, and bring this project forward for voters and decision makers to figure out how do we advance these at a pace that maybe is a little bit better than what we've done in the past. So I think these agenda items don't make it on the agenda by mistake. We put these things up there so that you can see what we're doing, what's coming to try to improve our transportation infrastructure.
Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, through the
Yeah.
mayor, a question for Mr. Adams. Do you have any idea how many dollars in road fuel tax is paid from residents of Matsu Borough, people passing through? I mean, state and federal road fuel tax. It's got to be unbelievable.
Through the mayor, it looks like I'm on a pond. I mean, I'm familiar with the vehicle registration tax and how we get some appropriations each year from it, but I'm not familiar with the tax that you're suggesting.
so
I
we
couldn't
pay it when
certainly
you go in
answer
and-
how much.
When you go buy fuel, obviously you're paying federal tax on a gallon of fuel, correct? You're paying a state tax on a gallon of fuel. Is Palmer, state doesn't tax us on fuel? The feds do.
The Matsu
Borough tax is 0.
The Matsu Borough tax is 0. We're talking about state roads, right?
Right, the state has it.
So the state taxes, correct? So we have federal, state, do any of the cities? I pay 5 cents a gallon at the Palmer Airport for fuel.
For avgas.
Well, no, any fuel that moves off. I buy bulk diesel. We go through lots down there. I pay 5 cents a gallon. That's what they charge us.
Yeah, I don't know. We could review Palmer's sales tax code and find out pretty easily.
Yeah. Well, I'm just curious on how many dollars are generated in taxes in the Matsu Borough on fuel.
Yeah, through the mayor to Mr. Glenn, I don't think we can answer that question because we don't track that. We did an analysis of what a local fuel excise tax might yield in terms of value annually. I think we were somewhere between roughly $5 and $7 million I think that was a nickel a gallon, is what we looked at several years ago, because we know Anchorage is at 10 cents. So if you were going to look at that, you'd probably want to stay below Anchorage somewhere. So we looked at about a nickel, and I think it was about 5 to 7 million a year, but currently it's 0.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Alrighty, sir. I guess we're ready to transition then to the next
Thank you.
subject.
That's great. So for the record, again, Tom Adams, Public Works Director. We're moving on to item C on the agenda here. I'm kind of segue, off the manager's comments. Again, you see a theme here. There is a lot of planning that's being pushed forward, transportation planning that ultimately leads to some education for us and hopefully means that there's a project to deal with that education. So we heard earlier about the corridor access management plan, spent a little bit of time talking about our transportation infrastructure program. Right now, we got our Safe Streets for All. To Assemblymember Fonoff's point earlier, this is a grant that we received, over $500,000 to actually achieve this study. So these are not borough dollars. These were received from the federal government. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce the borough's project manager from our PD&E group, Jamie Taylor, and then also the project manager, Joni Wilm, with Michael Baker International to give her presentation on the SS4A, as we might otherwise call it.
Alrighty. Yes.
I just wanted to add what Mr. Adams said real quick is we are in the planning stages with this SS4A. Our goal is to qualify for implementation dollars, right? So that was our goal from the beginning, but the Fed said you got to do this first. So, right, that's the nature of federal dollars. You got to jump through the hoops and do what they want you to do. So yes, it's a planning effort now, but the idea is once you get this and get it approved, it would then allow us to qualify for future grant opportunities under this program or umbrella with the feds. So just so you kind of understand, there's a longer term vision in play here.
Great. Thank you so much. And thanks so much for the opportunity to present tonight. I just want to start by saying happy birthday to Tom. So, and also just to reiterate, I'm really glad that this presentation was predicated by the first study and then also the talk about all the projects and funding those projects, because this study will help fund projects. I don't know if most of you have heard, but Anchorage actually just got almost $25 million to fund a project because it was identified in their safety plan. And so this is a very important step and could lead to the Mat-Su Borough getting that kind of money to fund projects, multiple projects in your area. So my name is Joni Wilm. I work for Michael Baker International, and I'm working closely with Jamie, who is the project manager with the Mat-Su Borough for the safety plan. And this is a comprehensive safety action plan. I know I was here to talk a little bit to the Planning Commission a while back as we introduced the project. For those of you who may have missed that, this project came about because you have staff that had the foresight to apply for these grant dollars. And so here we are, and we are at this stage in the plan. Let me see if I can advance this slide. Nope, there we go. So again, I'm Joni. I'm with Michael Baker. Our team is also includes R&M consultants and Fair and Peers. Our collective team has worked on 3 safety plans in Alaska now, and they're fairly new plans, so we can bring a lot of local Alaskan experience to you all. And what I want to primarily talk to you today about is the survey results. We put out a survey. We got 912 responses. That was a huge response. I've been planning for 15 years. I've never seen that many responses on a survey, so the community should feel really proud about that response from people in the community. The survey was open from June 26th to September 13th. We offered it online on the project website. The Mat-Su Borough did a small paid promotion on the Mat-Su Borough Facebook, which also helped promote the survey. We shared it with 13 local Mat-Su Borough Facebook groups, and we also made hard copies and distributed those in Palmer, Wasilla, and Houston, and collected 30 hard copies back. This is the distribution as the survey went. You can see you had a really good spread from all across the community. So there was a lot of interest from many areas in your Mat-Su Borough area. And I just am briefly summarizing this. We will be coming out with a more detailed survey report, so you can see all the questions, all the answers to the questions, how people responded. But just a very, very broad overview. We asked folks what would make it more likely for you to walk and bike in your neighborhood. And I also just want to predicate that by saying this is not a plan for biking and walking. It's a plan for all road users. So it's a Safe Streets for All program, and it's geared towards all modes. But this particular question was asked for biking and walking. What we heard back from the community, and these were the top 5 answers that we received in order of highest to lowest. So most people said if there were off-street multi-use pathways, they would be encouraged to walk and bike more. If there were safe, conveniently located sidewalks, they'd be encouraged to walk and bike more. Maintenance was a big issue, especially in wintertime. So all seasonal maintenance made people feel safer. Better lighting and visibility, especially at intersections, was a big deal for a lot of people. And then finally, reducing congestion and speeds was also a factor. We also asked people what their biggest challenges to roadway safety were, what they thought the biggest challenges were. The first one by far was maintenance. So again, getting back to the importance of that all seasonal maintenance. The second one was limited separated places to bike and walk. So again, that separation makes people feel safer. Unsafe driving behaviors such as speeding, distracted driving, and driving under the influence were big factors. A lack of crosswalks and sidewalks, and then finally inadequate lighting. This was the last question we asked in the survey. So again, just a very broad overview, but we asked people to identify their specific safety areas of concern. And so in this map, you can see all the different areas identified. If the circle was bigger, the red circle was bigger, it meant more people identified that exact area. So you can see that 166 in the middle. You can all probably guess where that is, at Bogart and Engstrom. So a lot of feedback from folks, very specific feedback, which was great. So we asked folks to identify where their spots were. The second thing we asked them is to tell us what in that spot was concerning them. And these were the top 5 areas of concern that we heard back from everyone that took the survey. So issues with feeling that the road design might be unsafe, congestion in that area, again, Bogart and Engstrom rising to the top, enforcement issues, and then unsafe facilities for biking and walking. Just going to get very briefly into the crash data. We have another tool that I'll talk about in just a sec where you will be able to take a deep dive into looking at everything we found. But just some big picture trends over the last, since 2018 to 2022, so 5 years, there's been 4,802 total crashes. Of those crashes, 57 were fatal, so that person did not make it home that night. 159 were serious injury, 22 involved bicycles, 30 involved pedestrians, and 82 involved motorcycles. Just looking a little bit deeper into that, a lot of these crashes, most of them happened on a combination of the major and minor arterials. The other biggest segment was crashes that happened on interstates, so 28%. Drugs and alcohol were involved in 24% of the crashes. 75% of all crashes occurred at intersections, so a big correlation between intersection and crashes. And then most crashes were vehicle to vehicle, so 79% of all crashes were vehicle to vehicle, 65% of serious crashes were vehicle to vehicle. And then breaking it down by mode, bicycle and pedestrian crashes, while they only made up 4% and 3%, of those 4% and 3% of crashes, 86% of those crashes resulted in some type of injury. So while we are not, this plan again is not just about bicycles and pedestrians, but we do recognize that when a bicyclist or pedestrian gets hit, they are more likely to have a severe injury. And so we want to acknowledge that and focus on how we can keep them safe. Secondly, motorcycles again made up 82%, or excuse me, 82 crashes total, 39% were serious crashes. They made up 15% of all crashes, which is a very large percentage. And 12% of all crashes with motorcycles involved alcohol or some sort of a driving under the influence. And then lastly, we did a count of ATV crashes. We know that that is an issue here in the Mat-Su Borough as well. So over that period, there were 9 total crashes with ATVs, 1 fatal, 6 with vehicles, and 5 that resulted in minor injuries. This is a trend by year. So this again is all crashes. It's not serious crashes alone, but you can see it's trending upwards. So that's a concern for us. We don't want to see that number going up. We'd like to see that going down. And again, and I'll show you in just a second, we have an online crash data dashboard that we want you to dive into. It has a lot more details. You can take a look at the serious injury and fatality crashes in much more detail. You can look at trends by age, gender, crashes by month, when they happened, was it light, was it dark, what season was it, and a lot of other details. And I think my main point for being here today is to encourage all of you to go onto the project website, which is ss4a.matsu.gov.us, and check out the data dashboard. So most of you might know Alex Hutchison. He's a local resident here. He works for us. And he created this really nice interactive dashboard, which has all kinds of details. So please go online and check that out. We also have launched a public workshop. So it's an online interactive public workshop. You can do it on your own time. And it'll guide you through all the crash data, all the survey data, what the Safe Streets for All program is all about, what's funding all of this, and will fund future projects. And all kinds of other details. So please check out the website, go online, and check out the online workshop. We're really proud of it. We think it turned out really nice, and yeah, I think you'll enjoy it. So real quickly, here's our next steps. This is our calendar. We started in April. We are hoping to finish in February. That was the deadline for Safe Streets for All implementation grants. So we want to make sure that you have a plan in hand so you can use it to apply for those implementation funds when the deadline hits. So we're in September, or we're in October. We launched our workshop in September. It will be open throughout the duration of the project. We'll come back to you in December and do an open house and also come back and present to you again. And we'll have a lot more safety analysis. We'll have project recommendations. We will have implementation recommendations and a lot more good details to help you all use it to apply for funds. So that's our plan. And that's it. That's my presentation. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Assemblyperson Fauna.
Hi, I think you did this presentation for one of the community councils, if I remember correctly.
Yes, for North Lakes.
Yes, and
Yes.
the concern was brought up, and that was, and I echoed that. One of the questions that originally asked how much it cost, and they were shocked to find out that we found out, yeah, we have a problem. Accidents happen, and we spent $500,000 for that without actually addressing the issues. And I understand you explained the reason for this, but my question is, out of this map over here, there's 166, which is the biggest spot in the area. We all know that this is not the capital of walking and biking. According to this data, biking and pedestrians only account for 7% of all of these things. I have a question: who directed and why was this focused specifically on this, biking and walking? And I have also a concern in this same data on this page is that it doesn't have even ATV charter, and I believe that total 9 crashes of ATV sounds very small number what the reality is. And I'm concerned if there is a different agenda and what's the reason behind why this is focused specifically on biking and walking. And some of the other residents actually came and spoke to us about that. And I gotta echo their concerns as well. Why was this study was focused, and you said it from the beginning, biking and walking instead of on other things equally?
No, so that's a great question. And as I stated at the beginning, this study it's the Safe Streets for All plan and comes from the Safe Streets for All program. It focuses on all modes. We're not just focusing on bicycling and walking. However, bicycles and pedestrians, when they are involved in a crash, their rate of injury is much more probable and much more likely. And so the Safe Streets for All program, which this plan is part of, wants to see that whoever is doing the comprehensive safety action plan acknowledges what's happening with bicyclists and pedestrians and make sure that the plan addresses their issues so that they can make those facilities safer. So it doesn't focus only on bicycles and pedestrians. It's for all road users.
Having lived here in this area for almost 30 years now, I think the concern, or at least equal amount of attention, should have been brought to the ATVs, dirt bikes, and that stuff, because that is actually a form of transportation that Matsu Borough residents use. And I see this is skewed only one direction, and I don't know if it's focused on specifically getting certain grants that will only benefit the bikes. But I do think this is a point missed over here, and even if it's may not be the way of transportation in other parts of United States or even Alaska, but in Matsu Borough, I know it is, and I would almost wish that there was equal amount of attention. And I'm sure I know the residents have brought up this attention. I'm personally bringing it up, and if there's going to be a future study of any sort, I don't want this to be directed towards specific small, less than 7% of the problem, so to speak. So that's my concern, and this is, I don't know if there's maybe someone else has a better explanation why this was focused on that, but I must vocalize this concern that was brought to us.
Okay. Assemblyperson Sumner, did you have a question, sir?
Yeah, I was just wondering about your data collection. Is it like, where'd you get this crash data? Was it from police reports or insurance?
The majority of the crash data, and I'm not the data analyst, so I can't answer super specific data questions, but the majority of our data comes from DOT. So we collect it from DOT and use it.
So you know where they get it? Okay, so say if you have a fender bender and it's not reported to the police, would it show up on this data or not?
Yes, I do believe police reports do show up on the data. Sometimes the police reporting can be a little bit limited because a lot of crashes are not reported. A lot of people get in a crash and they don't, like, if you're a bicyclist, you get in a crash and you're not hurt, you probably wouldn't report it to the police. So sometimes the police reporting data isn't as accurate, doesn't reflect all the crashes that are happening, but I do believe DOT coordinates with the police department to get their data counts, yes.
I guess the second part of my question was, are you getting any information from insurance companies, or is it just police?
That was just such a great question. We got that in our safety action plan team meeting just earlier this week, or last week. I can't remember now. It's a blur. But we are looking into that. We did not think to immediately look at insurance companies for data, but it was suggested by Todd with the Alaska State Troopers. And so we are taking a look at that now.
Further questions or comments? I think you're fine then.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Tom, do you have parting comments or anything? Or
I just want to address something really quick to Assemblymember Fauna through the mayor. So I want to recognize the fact that when this presentation came forward a couple meetings ago, there was a comment made by an attendee that they didn't feel as though they were notified of this study. We worked to address that almost immediately after that meeting. We invited them, we made them aware of the location where this survey could be taken, and we expanded, to address that comment specifically. And I think you heard earlier that, we have nearly 1,000 respondents to the survey, pretty impressive. There's some elections we don't get 1,000 people to attend, so I think that's pretty impressive. But I just want to reinforce, this is not intended to be purely a non-motorized study. It looks at all modes of travel, and it recognizes where our most vulnerable travelers are and tries to address how we might better protect those folks through any certain response. Other than that, I guess I just want to wrap up all three topics. I think, Assemblymember Fanoff asked a question, or excuse me, Nowers asked a question earlier about how can we prevent some of the problems of the past. And I hope that you get a sense tonight by, we're looking from multiple directions, whether it be a specific corridor and to try to address an existing problem. We look at our transportation network and try to reach out ahead. She said it perfectly earlier. Our needs far outweigh our ability to fund. But that doesn't mean we quit looking and quit planning and quit spending, honestly. So, that's what we're doing with our transportation infrastructure program. And then with this SS4A, it's just another example of a planning document that takes a different spin on looking where our safety issues are and how do we best address them. So, from Public Works perspective, we're not going to quit moving forward and trying to improve our transportation network. I think it's one of our key elements as a borough that we need to promote and protect. Improve. But if anybody thinks we're going to ever catch up to it, then that means that person has the biggest pocket of money, because that's really what it's going to take. I think I made mention, about a year ago, what it would take. It's in the hundreds of millions of dollars of investment that would need to take place in a pretty short amount of time for us to really make and get ahead of the game. So I just think it's just part of the process. You're always looking to try to stay ahead. You do your best to plan. You do your best to provide a spending plan that allows us to make good progress. But we will never be done working. Let's just put it that way. So I appreciate the opportunity. I think there's a lot of work for us to have, and I know we're not done. So.
Okay. Alrighty. Thank you, sir. So at this time, it's time for parting comments, and Planning Commission Chair CJ, would you like to take parting comments from your Planning Commission members?
Certainly. Thank you, Mayor. We'll start with Commissioner McCabe.
Oh dear. I just wanted to encourage the Assembly to be sure and take a good hard look at the CIP list. We had it before us last night, and we reprioritized one item. And please pay special attention to the shooting sports for youth. I think it's a really good return on investment. Thank you.
Commissioner Scoggins.
I guess if I had one comment on the safety side of things, and I don't know the answer to this, but we have atrocious drivers out there that don't use turn signals, and they're on their phone. Anybody can pull up an intersection, and I don't know how you curve that, but I feel like just some basic driver's education, and maybe, I don't know how you do it, but that's really where, that would save us millions right there, I believe, in accidents and stuff. But I don't know how to implement it, but that is like, nobody signals. They just, about half the people do, right? And then they stop. It's poor drivers are a lot of our problem more than they're a big part of it. We need better roads, but poor drivers would help if we get them fixed. That.
Commissioner Allen.
I enjoyed the presentations tonight. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Shane.
Just a quick thank you to all staff for presenting. This was really good information and looks like well thought out. So thank you for that. And thanks to everybody here.
Commissioner Glenn.
Thank you for all the information. I'd like to second Commissioner Scoggins' comments on we lack road traffic enforcement severely. And The drivers out here are unbelievable. It's getting worse all the time. I went to Willow this afternoon. I got passed on the right side of the road on a 2-lane doing and I was doing 70, and it was just like, what are you doing, you know? And I spent 2 years with my son in the winter in Southern California, and I watched the California Highway Patrol move in mass amounts of traffic. I mean, 2-3 million cars down I-15 smoothly, efficiently, and very few wrecks at doing 80 and 90 miles an hour. And I think we're capable of that here, but it is going to take enforcement, and the troopers are not up to it right now. So anyway, thank you for tonight. Thanks for all the information. I appreciate it.
Okay, I just want to say thank you for the presentations. They were very well done. Great information. I love the websites and look forward to digging into them. So appreciate that very much. And I also appreciate the opportunities of being able to come and be with the assembly. It's good to meet together.
Okay, now for assembly person hours, reporting comments.
Thanks for the presentation, and thanks for putting all that information out there so we can share it with folks in the valley and get as much feedback as possible on them. Thank you.
Assembly person Hale.
No comment, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Brown, parting comments. Mr. Attorney, Mrs. Clerk. Okay. And I'll get the rest of the assembly, but since the clerk, I did point out to the clerk that open house on the 6th of November. So I don't know if you want her to go ahead and automatically advertise it, or for the assembly, how many members would think about, okay, D, shit. Are you guys thinking or whatever? So, and then the planning commission, I'll leave it up to however you advertise your meetings. I don't know if a number of the planning commission members will be a majority there for that open house or not, but just so we don't run afar of advertising a public meeting. Okay. Assemblyperson McKee, parting comments?
Just a couple. When I hear Tom speaking, he's like a one-man band, and he just knows he's got it all up here. And I have to also say, as a 31-year resident of the borough, it is noticed. I mean, things going on out there are, you think, oh my gosh, this really took care of this problem. So good for you, Tom. The other one was when you were talking about, what's your name?
Kurt.
When Kurt was talking about the terrible drivers, and it's true. You know, I'm not a school board member, so I can't tell anybody what to do, but if they had a mandatory course in safe driving and phone usage and blah, 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 that kind of stuff, maybe it's too late for some of the other folks, but some of those younger drivers who are just driving, you know, with one eye on the phone and one eye on the road, if it was mandatory in the school curriculum in senior years, maybe that's an idea. So thanks.
Assemblyperson Renier.
Happy birthday, Tom. I want to thank everybody for coming out. I want to thank the Lord for all the blessings in the valley. Thank you, for our vets, our first responders. Lord, take care of all our residents. Help those people in North Carolina and everybody that needs you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Assemblyperson Sumner, parting comments, sir?
Yeah, thanks for everyone giving up their evening with their family to be here. And I'd be remiss not to mention that I was rear-ended on Bogard a couple of weeks ago, so I am one of those statistics. And Miss McKee, it was from a provisional driver.
Assemblyperson Gamble, parting comments, sir?
Yeah, in my almost 30 years as a Mat-Su Borough Fire Chief and Director of Emergency Services, I have firsthand experience with how bad traffic can be, the mixing of ATVs and vehicles and pedestrians and motorcycles. This is a safety problem that we need to get in front of, and the more we can do to get in front of this problem, the better off we're going to be in the future. Thank you.
Assemblyperson Fauna, parting comments?
Thank you again. Julie, I think this presentation was good, but this thick one that Mr. Adams provided to us, I think that's another one for us to have a whole separate meeting for, I guess. I wish we had some more Q&A, and I wanted to echo Mr. Shane's concern about the, not concern, but a question that I wish we'd have answers. The center lane, I think it paid off pretty well on sections of Palmer-Wasilla Highway. I think Bogart-Selden corridor would greatly would benefit that for a lot of the traffic, because on one of the accidents that happened, I think a lot, I've seen it personally several times, is the people that are waiting to turn on one street or another, and it's the people that are behind it that's just rear-ending, and probably phones and distractions have to do something with that. So I would fully support Ms. McKee's way to somehow enforce something into, or ask school board to implement some kind of, because they are in the process of starting at 14, getting a permit all the way to 18 when they're already driving. I think is if we could do something that is effective to educate the young drivers, I think that would probably pay off greatly, because I believe that's ultimately, they're the future drivers as they get adults too. So if you make that importance, and I think make that mandatory thing, I think that would be a good way of investment of our resources. So thank you so much for this meeting.
So I just want to thank staff for all the extra hours you're putting on products that we looked at tonight, and thank you, commission members for putting in the hours. We appreciate you volunteering. And Deputy Mayor, you had something else?
I just had a question for staff as far as the historical display. I've had some people reach out to me wanting to know how to donate.
Okay. Go ahead, sir.
So through the mayor, we had planned on providing you some insight on that Tuesday. I didn't think we can do it right now, but we'll have probably a rough up conceptual, some very rough cost estimates and what we're thinking. We've got a couple ideas we want to run by the assembly to make sure we're on par. Ms. Heindel's already set up an account for donations, but we wanted to run that by you before we did a push to the public soliciting donations. But the account's been set up and we're ready to go. Kind of wanted to talk through it with the assembly and make sure we're on track before we push something out, because I think to ask for donations, we probably need to give them some idea of what we're thinking. And plan to do that Tuesday night.
Thank you.
Okay. So any other parting comments that anybody? No? Okay, so we will adjourn at 7:33.